Hello, healers. My name is Ben, and this is the Moss Report. I'm here today with my father, author and founder of the Moss Report, Dr. Ralph W. Moss. Good morning, Dad.
Good morning, Ben.
I'm very excited about today's topic. We just went to Mexico and we visited a lot of integrative oncology clinics, and this topic was something that came up over and over again, and I feel like it's super important to share with our audience. And that topic, as you know, is gut health and the microbiome. So I have a number of questions queued up for you, but why don't you just start by maybe telling us a little bit about what the topic is? What is the microbiome? What even is gut health? Can you sort of bring us up to speed a little bit with that?
The microbiome is the collection of microorganisms within your body, and the microorganism is basically defined as any organism that can only be seen through a microscope. So this could include bacteria, algae, fungi, and although viruses are not considered living organisms, they are also sometimes classified as microorganisms. And there's a ton of them in your body. It's quite astonishing, actually, that it's often said there are more microorganisms in your body than there are normal cells of your body.
Ooh.
So, so from their point of view, you're just a vehicle that they use to carry them through life.
Well, my response to that is gross.
Uh-huh.
And don't I want to just like try to get rid of those things? I mean, germs and things, is that what we're talking about? Like germs?
Yes, in a sense. Germs is a very imprecise, 19th century term, but these are very important part of your body. It's just like flowers and bees have, a relationship that they depend on each other for their health and their survival. It's the same thing with these microorganisms. You've got to have them, and there's a healthy gut microbiome and there's an unhealthy gut microbiome. And I want to say that looking at it from a scientific point of view and having a long perspective on this, I can't recall any other topic within oncology, within cancer science, that has come on so fast and so importantly, and the discussion of this has moved to the front burner in many ways. Now, you won't, if you're a cancer patient, you're unlikely to have heard about this from your oncologist because, it might take 20 years for an important scientific discovery to actually work its way into the clinic, into the treatment of the average patient. But from a scientific point of view, from the point of view of research, it's a tremendous, tremendous increase. And and I noticed, like, I want to present a couple of three papers that I was recently reading and that have stuck in my mind. But when I looked at the number of citations, this is one way that I judge the importance of a paper or the impact, let's say, not necessarily the importance, but the impact of a paper. Some of these papers have hundreds or thousands of citations. In other words, other people picking up that article and citing it. And so this is no longer a matter of dispute between the alternative community that's always insisted on the importance of the bowels and the gut health and all that. That stuff goes back to, the early pioneers, I would say, of the health movement. But it's now very important within the orthodox, the conventional, if you will, scientific community.
Well, what do you think it was that caused that to happen? Was there some one study or a product or theory that was put out there that sort of sparked this interest in this topic now?
A lot of it, Ben, came from studies done at MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, which is oftentimes rated the number one cancer center in the United States, and actually from the group around Jim Allison, who won the Nobel Prize for his discovery of the immune checkpoint inhibitor drug. So this is one of the modern forms of immune therapy. And what they showed in a number of different studies, and one of which I would like to present to our audience, is that this kind of treatment, immune therapy, we did I, and Jacob Moss did a film on this topic a few years ago,
We sure did.
but it it works spectacularly well in some cases, and then it doesn't work in a lot of other cases. Or the result may be a temporary improvement, but then it stops working. And so the obvious question was, well, why is it working for some individuals and not for other individuals? And as they pursued this question, for melanoma, which is the first indication for immune therapy in cancer, but also for lung and some of the other kinds of cancer in which immune therapy is being used. But as they pursued it, they found that there was a big difference in the state of the gut microbiome in terms of the likelihood of responding to immune therapy.
So Jim
And
Allison's group at MD Anderson, they were the ones who sort of noticed this when they were studying their drugs as they were developing them. Is that right?
correct. I mean, this has been a process going. Jim Allison, this has been his whole life work. So it's been a process going on for quite a while. And I can't give you the exact chronology of when they discovered it, but it's within the last 10 years, I'd
So
say.
the upshot of that was that they saw that sometimes when the drug wasn't effective, the immunotherapy drugs were not effective, there was some dysfunction within the gut microbiome.
Correct. And and I would say that it wasn't, it was somewhat about the number of microbes in the gut, but more importantly, it was about the number of different organisms that were in the gut. And then certain certain bacteria are lacking in people who have no response to the immunotherapy. There's one in particular called Akkermansia. Akkermansia, which is fairly recently discovered, there, there's only one company that I'm aware of, maybe two, marketing a supplement of Akkermansia, but it's very expensive and not at all proven that taking a pill of Akkermansia is going to increase the amount. Akkermansia is a very important microbe, but it could only be generated and come to the fore within a healthy gut microbiome.
And by healthy,
So,
you mean a microbiome that has great diversity of types of microbes. Is that right?
yeah, yes. I think the body seeks its own level. It's a self-regulating mechanism. Within a healthy body, there's a healthy microbiome, which means not an overgrowth of it or an undergrowth of it, not having all the, this is the wisdom of the body. It's actually the wisdom of the microbiome, is that it finds a level, a balance among these many different contending organisms that works for you and that keeps your gut in good shape and also keeps your immune system in good shape, because there's almost like a one-to-one correspondence between the health of the gut microbiome and the health of the immune system. It's astonishing, actually. Rather than take a supplement, there's a much better way of
Well,
approaching
I'd like
this.
to get into that with you in terms of what practical steps people can do to understand where their microbiome is and how to adjust it. But I think I want to just talk a little bit more about that paper that you referenced, or rather the research that you referenced around John
Yeah,
Allison's work at MD Anderson, because I'm not
yeah.
sure that I understand, and if I don't, probably our audience doesn't, what the relevance is there. So, if someone's studying an immunotherapy drug and they're seeing that it's less effective or not effective at all when there's a dysfunction in the microbiome, what conclusions can we draw from that as far as what we know about the gut health and the microbiome as a whole?
That's a very good question. And one of the really important takeaways is that people who are given antibiotics around the time of their treatment have a much worse response to immunotherapy than people who are not taking
So,
antibiotics.
an antibiotic is designed to prevent or beat back an infection, but does that correlate with the gut microbiome as well?
That's right.
So,
Because these are microbes. I mean, they're friendly microbes. So the practical import of this, and I do want to show the papers, but the practical import of this is people who take or are given antibiotics around the time of getting the immune therapy have a much worse response to the immune therapy than people who don't have antibiotics. Doesn't mean never to take antibiotics, and there are obviously times when you need to, but it probably should be withheld in for as much as possible in people who are getting immune therapy for cancer. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is in some of the studies that probiotics are not effective in terms of improving the outcome because usually the probiotics that people take have one or two strains of bacteria in them. And uh, that's going to probably just overload the system with certain forms of bacteria, and the other ones are not affected. So you need a diversity. That's the key word. The the key here is that the immune checkpoint drugs, like Yervoy, like Keytruda, now the best top-selling cancer drug in the world, um, they don't kill cancer cells. So you put them in a test tube with a bunch of cancer cells, nothing happens. They allow the immune system to kill cancer cells. They're unblocking the immune system. The immune system is blocked by the cancer. They unblock the immune system. So when you say that the immune checkpoint drugs don't work or don't work very well in people who don't have a good functioning, healthy gut microbiome, what you're really saying is the immune system doesn't work well, because I don't believe that this is an interaction between the gut microbiome and the drugs. I think all the drugs do is unblock the immune system. So really what you're saying, in my opinion, is that a healthy gut microbiome is necessary for the immune system to work. And if you destroy the gut microbiome or seriously injure it or put it out of balance, you're not going to be able to mount an effective immune response against the cancer. And I think now it's generally known and understood that the immune response is one of the major components of fighting against cancer. So, and other diseases too. So it's much broader than just the immune checkpoint drug world, which is sort of the spearhead of the general topic of immune competence, the immunotherapy of cancer. In the 1950s, Macfarlane Burnett, another winner of the Nobel Prize, and my former boss, Lewis Thomas, put forward a theory called immune surveillance. And the theory was that the immune system surveils the body, goes everywhere. The white blood cells go everywhere. And when it finds a cancer cell, which is an abnormal, one of your abnormal cells, person's abnormal cells, it identifies and kills it. Well, that theory didn't work out exactly right because nobody could explain at that time why it was cancer developed at all. If your immune system is supposed to be surveilling the body and taking out cancer cells, why would there still be cancer? And of course, in 60% of the population, there is no cancer. But in 40% of the population, cancer eventually develops, in the United States at least. So this was at a kind of a standstill until the work that Jim Allison did at MD Anderson. He showed that there were blocking factors that were produced by the cancer to turn off the immune system. These are produced by cancer cells, and they attach to the immune cells, and they stop the immune cell from acting. What's confusing is that they didn't kill the immune cell. So if you measured the number of white blood cells in the cancer patient, at least in the early initial stages, it didn't appear abnormal. But the abnormality was going on inside, invisibly inside the system. So what Jim Allison did was invent this drug Yervoy that would get between the blocking factor and the white blood cell, and that prevented the cancer from being able to turn off the white blood cell. When you do that, you now allow the white blood cell to attack and kill the cancer cell. It's brilliant. And this has been very effective in some kinds of cancer. Some cancers are more receptive than others. So now we have a different understanding of the immune system. Yes, there is a mechanism of immune surveillance going on, but the cancer is not just sitting there idly waiting to be attacked and killed. It has its own weapons to use to block the immune system. Now we have a weapon that we can use to unblock the immune system. These are immune checkpoint drugs. How we as consumers, as people, as potential cancer patients, how we can influence that war that's going on between the cancer cell and the immune cell. And that's why I find these papers to be very exciting. It's exciting because yes, it can improve, definitely could improve the outcome of cancer therapy. And there are clinical trials underway, by the way. And I looked this up this morning of in clinicaltrials.gov of doing exactly this, trying to work on and change the gut microbiome to make a better outcome in immune therapy. But I take this much further, much further. I think this was something relevant to all of us, and it has to do, we should be urgently trying to improve the state of our gut microbiome, because if you look at the typical standard American diet, which is not just in America, but now spread all over the world, more people are spending more money on fast food than they are on home-cooked meals. And so the number of foods that have live bacteria in them is gone down to almost nothing. It's heated, it's chemically treated, there are things in it that are harmful that are going to certainly kill any microbiomes that are left. So there are two things, and one of them is to buy foods and consume foods that have live bacterial cultures in them. Yogurt being, of course, the most famous example. I'm on a sauerkraut kick because sauerkraut can also have, and can I show my props here? I've got my props. So you want to get sauerkraut that has live culture in it. This is not a commercial plug. I picked up 3 in the last couple of days. No preservatives, no vinegar, not cooked. It's always going to be found in the cooler section. yeah, refrigerated section in the supermarket. That's Bubby's, which is very tasty, but you'll notice one word that you don't find on the Bubby's label, and that's organic.
Hmm.
So I just don't like the idea that you're going to, eat these sprayed cabbages. I'm not saying I know for a fact that Bubby's is sprayed, but I know for a fact that they don't have organic on anywhere in their material.
Hmm.
So here are two that are organic. I made a My wife and I, Martha,
Hmm.
made a dinner with this one last night.
Hmm.
This is from Wegmans, which is, you have to be within driving distance of them. Somebody was going up to our bigger city and picked me up a jar of this sauerkraut original green cabbage and caraway organic, Wegmans organic. That's live bacteria. And then this one is more readily available, and that is um, wild brine. And again, it's live organisms in here. It's refrigerated, it's certified organic. It's raw and fermented. Fermented is another way of saying that it has live bacteria
Oh,
in it.
really? Okay. So anything
Uh,
fermented is
yeah,
going to contain some microbes that we would want to have.
absolutely. And I'm always looking for diversity.
Hmm.
When we lived where there was a food co-op, I would go to the food co-op and I'd go shop along the periphery in the area where they had the local people's products, people homemade yogurts and so forth. And I can still get some of those at food fairs and things like that. So you should look for. I'd certainly start with pickles, sauerkraut, yogurts, kefir, even some sourdough breads have some, but they also are higher in carbohydrates, which I'm trying to avoid. But and you can find lists of foods, but they should always be uh, in in the refrigerator section because they're live organisms. They have to be kept alive. The other very, very, very important component of this is the care and feeding of the bacteria once you get them into your system, and that's fiber. They live on fiber, and uh, a very good source is chicory root, which a lot of people take as a substitute for coffee. That's New Orleans coffee is made with chicory. Um,
You can eat
but
it? You
I,
mean like a plant? Eat
No, it's the root. It's a roasted root. You can buy this. I
I've never
have it
heard of
in my
it.
cabin. Yeah,
Chicory
well,
root?
it's the main source of inulin, and inulin is the main prebiotic. So now we're talking about the prebiotics, what you take in order to feed the
Okay.
probiotics. But because if you put probiotics into your system and you don't give them anything to eat, they're going to die.
Hmm.
They need care and feeding.
It's like
Now
a
that
garden.
Yes, exactly. And just like a garden, you have to tend be conscious, be aware. It needs water, it needs fertilizer and so
Hmm.
forth. But but the general class of things they need are fiber, so you can get that from fruits and vegetables. But if you want to get a little bit ahead of the game, you would get some chicory root, and you can make a coffee substitute with chicory. I've picked out three studies. We'll start with this one. This is all of these are from peer-reviewed medical journals. This one happens to be from Poland. It's just a general comprehensive review of the topic, and it says that the immune system plays a key role in cancer suppression. Immunotherapy is used as a treatment for various kinds of cancer. There are specific dietary patterns that are associated with a good response, and they did a review of this entire topic, and it shows the basic underlying conclusion is specific bacteria species inhabiting the GI tract that's to say the gut, can have a beneficial influence on the effectiveness of immunotherapy. Antibiotics weaken gut bacteria and worsen the immune checkpoint uh, blockers which are the drugs we were just talking about, whereas they feel that supplementation can restore bacterial balance in the intestines. Again, I would contest that a little bit because there's other studies showing that taking a supplement is not so effective and may even be harmful if you're just taking one or two bacteria in a supplement. So the food approach is the better approach, in my opinion. And then it says there's a strong association between one's diet, the gut microbiome composition, and the outcome of immunotherapy. And again, I chose this paper because it was clearly written, but this is one of hundreds of papers that one could cite along these lines. So this one it comes from California Institute of Behavioral Neurosciences and Psychology in Fairfield, California, I guess. Influence of microbiome and antibiotics on the efficacy of immune checkpoint inhibitors. And they say they looked at a total of 16 articles involving 1,293 patients with cancer who were receiving immune therapy, and they were included in the final review. All 16 articles revealed the effect of either gut microbiome or antibiotics or both on immune checkpoint inhibitor therapy, and antibiotics negatively impacted the effectiveness of immune checkpoint inhibitors. So I think that that's interesting because this is an objective review of other people's articles. It's like a review article, but they were uniform in their conclusion that the immune system was involved in cancer and that antibiotics negatively impacted the effectiveness. Yes, antibiotics undercut the effectiveness. And then I want to go and look at the third paper. So this is one of the most important papers done on this topic. It's from Science, the leading science journal in the United States, and from 2018. And a lot of the authors are from different places: University of Rochester, Moffitt, Harvard, MedImmune. This is, and a lot of from MD Anderson. So what do they say? They say that mouse models suggested that the gut microbiome would change tumor response to these immunotherapy drugs. There were significant differences in the diversity and composition of the patient's gut microbiome in terms of responders versus non-responders. So if you look at people responding, meaning having tumor shrinkages, disappearance of the cancer, prolonged survival without growth of the cancer. That's what they're talking about when they talk about responses, responders versus non-responders. When you look at that, who responds and who doesn't respond to immune therapy, there is greater diversity and abundance of various kinds of microbes in those patients. And we're not going to get into which microbes because different studies show different things in terms of which are the microbes. What I'm saying is build up the general healthiness of your gut microbiome with probiotics and prebiotics, and the body will find its own level, and you'll have a strong immune system that will then help you with your own fight against cancer, whatever stage you're at, or even in the prevention of cancer.
It sounded like you just said that you believe that this aspect of cultivating a healthy and diverse microbiome is a key factor in both prevention and actively trying to fight against a cancer that lives inside of your body. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Very, very well put. And I think that that is what I believe. And it's supported by the literature, by the scientific literature. And look at what they're saying. And you know how cautious scientists are, and there's dozens of scientists on this paper in the leading scientific journal in the US. And what are they saying? The gut microbiome may influence anti-tumor immune response and therapeutic responses, meaning the control of or destruction of cancer, of tumors, may be improved via its, meaning the immune system's modulation. Modulation means change or improvement. So, and this has not been extensively studied in cancer patients. We're getting closer, to that. There are a lot of clinical trials underway, but there's so many indications that the immune system is involved in many diseases, or out of control in other cases. So this is extremely promising, and I just want to basically skim through some of the rest of this paper, because I've highlighted some things, what they mean by a response. Um, the conventional understanding of how immune therapy works, or this kind of immune therapy works in cancer, is that cells that are highly mutated, have a high mutational load or tumor mutational burden, that those are the cancers that are likely to respond to drugs like Yervoy, Opdivo, and Keytruda, and so forth. But this paper, which is a high level paper, again, says a high mutational load, meaning a lot of mutations within the cancer, alone appears neither sufficient nor is it essential. In other words, like, doctors look at your tumor, they'll analyze the tumor for various markers, the most important of which is considered TMB, tumor mutational burden, meaning how many mutations does the cancer have, under the theory that the immune system will recognize cells that are highly mutated, that's to say different from normal cells, and attack them. And although there is some truth to that, it isn't a sufficient explanation for who's actually responding to immune therapy versus those who are
I
not
see. Okay.
responding. So they say there's a great number of mutations in the tumor alone is not enough, nor is it even necessary to have a response to immune therapy. That's revolutionary. What they're now showing is that the diversity and the strength of the microbiome is what is necessary and sufficient to have a response to these drugs, for your immune system to work, to actually work.
It paints a pretty clear picture about the strength of the relationship between gut health and the microbiome and responsiveness to this drug, which the drug itself relies on the immune system being healthy to then have the desired effect in fighting cancer. Is that right?
Right. That's exactly right. But these drugs are only a stand-in for strength of the immune system. If you don't have a strong immune system, you're not going to have a good response to those drugs. The drugs don't do it. The drugs allow your system to do it. They aid your system, but the system's working. It's being blocked in some respects, and so the drugs are helpful, but they won't be helpful if you don't have a strong immune system. And you won't have a strong immune system if you have a weak or deficient gut microbiome. That's the point. And this has been studied up one side and down the other. And I could show you, if we had time and inclination, how many, what the impact of this paper has been. It's phenomenal. And many other papers along these lines. So from a consumer point of view, or from the patient point of view, we don't have to wait for the completion of all the studies or all the clinical trials that one could imagine, and it could be done, and there are dozens underway. You don't have time to wait anyway. I mean, you're gonna have to choose your foods to begin with in any case, right? So what should you be choosing? Because you actually have a better way to influence the immune system than most doctors could provide you with. I'm not saying that these immune checkpoint drugs are not important. Of course they are. And Jim Allison deserved the Nobel Prize for this, and many other Nobel Prizes should be given for this area. But the consumer comes into this. the patient comes into this. And comes in the sense that we as a society have neglected the health of the microbiome. You have a very, very powerful way to influence your immune system and build it up. And we know that you can rebuild your immune system, in the sense, rebuild your gut microbiome, which in some ways that are known and other ways that are mysterious, this gut microbiome very powerfully directs and influences the white blood cells of the body to be able to recognize and kill cancer. And it's simply a matter of making intelligent choices in your shopping and your food preparation and your consumption of different items. And what I'm saying is that there are 10 or so different food categories that have live probiotics in them. And then there are foods that have, we call prebiotics, meaning they're involved in the care and feeding of the probiotics. And these two things, they are necessary and should be very effective in terms of building up your immunity. Now, it's not going to happen overnight. These foods have to get into your system, and they have to grow, and they have to talk to each other and make for a healthy gut. And many, by the way, many other illnesses and ailments are positively affected with this. I believe in the wisdom of the body, in the sense that I don't have to sit up, nights thinking how am I going to balance my microbiome. I'm taking in the foods that contain. I'm giving this system, the bodily system, and especially the intestinal system, the tools that it needs to create a healthy environment. And you provide it with the right, elements, and it'll find its own level. The body has a natural ability to create a healthy gut microbiome if you give it all the elements that it needs. Um, Otherwise, you're getting into areas where you're going to have to sort of force it to have the right balance. And there are some very interesting experiments underway we haven't talked about, fecal transplants, where they take, I don't want to get too gross about this, but they'll take some of the bacteria from the gut microbiome out of one, like a relative who doesn't have cancer, or a person who has responded positively to immunotherapy, meaning they have an effective immune system, they have an effective gut microbiome, and they'll transplant those, implant with a colonoscopy. They'll implant that into the colon of a person who is not responding to immunotherapy, and then the person will
Amazing.
respond. So I've heard anecdotally 2 cases like this, by people that I had every reason to trust, and so I know, and there are clinical trials underway, quite a few, but mostly for colitis and Crohn's disease and irritable bowel syndrome. That's where this has really taken off and become, quite vigorously pursued. In cancer, maybe a few studies are underway, and there are some places that are doing this in Mexico,
Mhm.
but I can't endorse it because there's some potential danger to doing that as well. But the safe way of doing this, the way that, would be much safer, would be to do what I'm suggesting, which is to step up your ingestion, taking in foods that contain live cultures, traditional foods that, like yogurt, which is, been associated with longevity and so forth for the obvious reasons, and also these fermented foods like raw, um, organic pickles and sauerkraut, things like that. And then also make sure that you're giving enough fiber. giving fiber. And if you want to go, a little bit more specific, um, inulin. The coffee that I make almost every morning has some roasted chicory root in it. I buy locally a brand that has that. And so that adds to the amount of inulin that I'm getting into my system and Martha's system. I would also, um, and do, take certain supplements that would also uh, boost the immune system. In other words, not only unleashing the immune system, but first of all, making sure you have an adequate number of white blood cells. And of the white blood cells, the most important are the lymphocytes. And other studies at MD Anderson showed that having a score of 1800 on your complete blood count test, your CBC test, um, correlated with the best response to immune therapy. So we know sort of what the level we're aiming for is. And I want to emphasize the fact that antibiotics can have a negative impact on the gut microbiome. So even though we know that they are necessary in a lot of circumstances, you want to minimize their use. Now we have another reason why we want to minimize the use of antibiotics. Only use them when they're absolutely necessary or there's nothing else that could be done. And then you want to rebuild your gut microbiome as fast as possible.
So these seem to be some pretty mission critical pieces of the puzzle for people who are battling cancer or trying to prevent themselves from getting cancer.
This is really good news for cancer patients. More and more people are getting immunotherapy for cancer. Here's a way, almost cost-free way, to make it a lot more effective than it's being, to be in that category of responders instead of the category of non-responders. And for the general public, I think it underlines that we have found a way to build the immune system, to boost the immune system that, again, is easy to do. You're going to eat every day, probably anyway. You might as well eat the foods that are really healthy for you, and therefore build your immune system, and then you have less chance of developing cancer, or if you do develop cancer, of having it be well controlled by the immune system.
Great. And we will include some links to the studies that you've mentioned in this recording in the description below. And also we'll include a list of these prebiotics and probiotics and good healthy foods to help strengthen and boost the gut microbiome to have good diversity and good, healthy, strong immune responses and cancer fighting ability. But for now, for the Moss Report, I'm Ben Moss. How are you healing today? Thank you for watching. We really appreciate all of the support. Please leave a like, a comment, subscribe to the channel, and visit themossreport.com. We wish you all the best for health and healing.